Wyn and I want to express our gratitude for every one of our listeners. Thank you for being a part of this podcast and sharing this space with us each week. We are now offering an opportunity to work with Wyn or myself individually in a deeper look towards what's true about life and who you really are. If you'd like to know more, email me or Wyn for more details. In a 3-day dive under the noise, anything is possible. Let's find out. Now onto the podcast.
Welcome. This podcast is an exploration into being human and what's possible when there's less attention on the noise in our heads. Warning. While listening to this broadcast, you may experience moments of deep peace, sighs of relief, personal insights, or long stretches of dead air. Do not be afraid. This is normal. Under the Noise with Wyn Morgan and Kate Roberts.
Welcome to this week's Under the Noise with me, Wyn Morgan, and my amazing co-host, Kate Roberts. Hello, Kate.
Hi, Wyn.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I am well too, thanks very much. I am well. Although I spent yesterday at the time of recording with my brother's 2 grandkids in Legoland.
Wow.
And hanging out with a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, their parents, my niece Rebecca, and I guess what would he be called? Well, my niece's husband Adam, Violet and Jet. It showed me that there is such a thing as getting older and not having the energy of a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. Because I'm pretty sure that they're up for it again today because they stayed overnight in Legoland. I came home and I was wiped out. And I woke up this morning still wiped out. Amazing day, though. A lot of fun. A lot of fun. Now, that's not what we're going to talk about today.
It's not?
No, it isn't. You had an idea, so don't sound so surprised. It's not. So you had a quote that you'd seen recently and thought it might be fun to explore.
Yeah, the quote was, I guess I should have it in front of me. So I guess I'll just say, I don't know if this is the exact quote, but it said, if you're not going within, you're going without.
Mm.
And I just thought that was such a fun quote to kind of explore, although I did not have a direction necessarily, but I think in the book, and this is Neale Donald Walsch, again, just because I haven't been reading it, but the idea is that we're kind of focused on the things outside of us. So if that's the direction and that's the focus of our attention, are the things outside of us, right? Where we think that that's where our experience is coming from. We think that all of the things that we're seeing and the people in the world and everything else, that it's happening to us. And that it also says something about us. So it's like everything outside in, right? If you're going without. But it also means if you're going without, not only are you not realizing that your experience is inside out, so you don't realize that, or you don't see it at the time, or you're not aware of it, But it also means that you're focusing on the outside, but not in terms of that's a good way to say it. Like, we're not using the deeper part of us to experience those things. And so going within is when your focus is on, or your attention is on, even like a deeper perspective of what's happening outside of you. It's like looking through almost like how the deeper part of you and your own wisdom sees the outside, experiences the outside. And so bringing it back inside, like finding moments of stillness or calm and kind of bringing it inside into a deeper perspective and an openness and like an unknown space, and accessing our wisdom in that way, and then going into the outside and putting focus on that. Like, it's a different focus. Like, I just heard Michael Neal on a video talk about, he was quoting someone else, but saying, I look through my eyes, not with them. And so it's almost like being able to access how life, how wisdom, how intelligence, how love sees what's happening outside, and using those as your eyes and your ears. At least that's, that may not at all be what I read, but just the way I interpreted it. Did anything show up for you in that one?
A heap. Whether I can find words is a different question. Well, the first thing, as I reflect on the quote, is that I remember the times where I was seeking the external, the outside, in order for the inside to be okay. And I don't know whether I eventually realized it. I don't know if that's the right way of saying it. That's clearly a recipe to continue to look for something that is never there. I kept looking for feelings out there, to your point about inside out versus outside in. So I was going without. Because I thought the answers were outside. I thought that's where all the good stuff was. Well, in fact, I thought that's where the good and the bad was. I didn't think there was anything inside at all. Well, I was happy to have bumped into something that certainly feels an awful lot more true than that, which is the opposite, which is why the quote was something that piqued my interest when you mentioned that before we started recording. I think, yeah, let's talk about it. And then when I was listening to you explore just now, it's a lovely way of saying it, that seeing the richness from within helps see more richness out there. I mean, if someone who knew me 12 years ago and listened to me talk about my deep thoughts then, and then listened to my deep thoughts now, they'd have thought, what happened to this guy? how it's chalk and cheese, right? This is a different person, surely. As I will very quietly sit and notice and or muse over, ponder over things such as the existence of light, the existence of having our own senses that we can witness what's happening in the world of form. Light, sounds, when you talked about eyes and ears earlier, smells, tastes, touch. And for me to notice that they are the gifts by which this part of the form of the universe can witness the other parts of the form of the universe and know its perfection inside and outside. I mean, that's a heck of a thing for this guy to be able to see something about. Because the person 12 years ago would have been in a different universe to that, which is something I'm very grateful for. I mean, I find it astonishing that we have these sensory abilities to make sense of the outside world from the physical aspects that we have: our eyes, our ears, our nose, our taste buds in our mouth, the nerve endings in our skin, and emotions in order to actually witness things and then make sense of them or nonsense of them from inside the spectacular organ called the brain. I always want to be in awe of that, because I find the awe of that just, it makes me grateful to have been born to see the awe of that. Mm. And whatever I do with my life is an absolute bonus on top of the fact that I could witness this world and experience it in such an extraordinary way. But I also think that I remember a number of times being a bit confused with that whole statement of go within, go inside. Because it looks like, well, that's more of Wyn. It's more of Wyn thinking about Wyn, and it isn't that at all, in my mind. It's more of going inside to see more clearly. To the point that you made about the inside out nature of how our experience is created moment by moment. It's less self-absorption. It's less of Wyn on Wyn's mind. And it's funny that almost like the paradox isn't the right word for it, but it's the best word I've got right now for it. The more I've done that going within, not the Wynness of within, but how my experience is created, the more my eyes are actually, and my experience senses are pointing out there more than in here. Less of what does this mean for me, more of wow.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, one way of maybe me saying that would be the more within I've gone, is the more I've seen that there's nothing personal at all in life. And I thought going within was, let me analyze Wyn. No, it's dissolved the Wynness when I remember that. Now, it doesn't mean, there isn't a Wynness here. There is still, okay, there's this form and there's this expression of this matter and this energy, this flavor of me. And even that isn't personal. That's just another version of the miracle of the universe, or whatever other word you listening at home, whatever makes sense to you about that, or makes sense to you. You mentioned Michael Neale, and it's still my favorite book. My favorite non-fiction book is The Space Within that he wrote, and it came out in 2016. I remember reading an advanced copy of that on a plane, coming back from having a conversation with him. I remember every paragraph I was reading, I was welling up, of touching that space within and being really grateful and relieved by it. So I think that space within that's where there's nothing that can be done with. There is no going without in that space within. That space within is everything all at once. So that's what came up for me.
I think it's cool. Like when you realize you can't get it wrong. Like even if, and so many people will, they'll spend their whole lives without. Not realizing there's a within that's not their kind of personal mind. And somehow I kind of feel like we came to play in that space too. I mean, I spent the majority of my life, as you said, for yourself in that space without. And in this book, he would say, God in the conversation would say, because it's the remembering that you came here for. So play your whole life, because when you pass, you're going to remember then, no matter what. You can't lose. There's nothing lost. So if we're eternal, and I believe that for myself, it doesn't matter if in this life, if I remember who I really am, because at some point I will. I'll come back and remember. But it's like when you're living this kind of human life, and then you start to see who you really are, that deeper part of who you are and what it's connected to. That is cool. But so is playing in the world and mixing it up in the world and forgetting, because we always will remember. And then maybe we come back and play in another body and we remember a little bit more. I have no idea how that works, but I know what it feels like when I even catch a glimpse of that truth inside me. Like a glance at who I really am. I know what that feels like. And then I go without. And then I go within. And I jump in and out. Like I'm here for all of that. Even the hard stuff. I got a question for you, Wyn. If you were to have this conversation with someone who doesn't feel like they have any clue what within is, like if you gave somebody that quote and you said, if you're not going within, you're going without. And they're like, what? What do you think you would say?
I don't know what I'd say, but the first person who springs to mind, as they wouldn't know what that was all about, would be me not long ago.
Good answer, Wyn. That's funny.
It feels true too, but I don't know, because I think I've ever asked that question. I've not said that quote. I haven't heard it until today. What would I say? I don't know. Because in order for me to have said that to somebody, it would have had to have made sense based upon something else that already had happened. I wouldn't just say to a stranger, hey, go within, or you go without. I mean, I wouldn't do that. So I don't know what I'd say. And yet, in a conversation, I would always want it to be relevant to the way that person's expressed how they see life and the world. So it possibly would have very different words, a very different point. So I wouldn't start there if I didn't know that had any kind of relevance to them. Because I remember hearing this conversation at a conference, and a friend of mine was told by somebody, hey, do you know you don't exist? And I just went, well, what a way to start talking to a stranger. I thought, this is, very smart person talking to another very smart person. A complete disconnect. It happens to be right. It happens to kind of be true, but still not the place to start a conversation, in my mind.
Wyn, it sounds more interesting than what do you do for a living? Or the weather. I still would be more interested in that conversation.
I don't know. If someone pointed at me and said, it don't exist, I would want to run the opposite direction. I would still be in a polite conversation with someone talking about the weather because I happen to be fascinated by the weather.
I love how different we are. I would be like, oh, that's okay. What are we talking about? I'd be present all of a sudden, I think.
Yeah. Well, if I don't exist, then neither do you. So you can put that finger you're pointing at me at right where it came from. I mean,
or I could just give him a little slap in the face and be like, you sure?
Yeah. You sure?
You sure about that, buddy?
By the way, we're not condoning violence in any way on this podcast. That was a mere puff, as they say within legal terms.
You know what I did think of, though, after I asked you that question?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of turned it towards myself for a second. Like, do I know? Like, how did I first get a sense of that space within? And I can't tell you anything specific, but I can tell you that it came from time alone.
From trying to?
It came from time that I spent by myself.
Okay.
So I know I was alone.
Mm-hmm.
I know I could get a sense of it when I settled down mentally. I know I could sense it in nature.
Yeah.
Like, when you're just first getting a sense of that space, I don't think it comes in some, maybe a deep conversation of how we don't exist. I don't think it would ever have found me there. I think it would find me in other places, like being in nature, like spending time alone, and when my mind gets a little quieter, like somehow peace resonated there, quiet resonated there. The perfection of nature, it resonates there for me too. Like very simple ways, it started to find me. Sometimes the most uncomplicated, simple. And each time I came back, and still to this day, it feels familiar. Like remembering something you forgot. Like that.
Well, there's a part of what you said that reminded me of something. That look within, I remember at one point, sounded to me like more analysis, more mental work, not less.
Yeah.
The space within, the space between a lot of busy thinking.
Yeah.
And I'd forgotten that I used to think that it was, I had kind of like messed that one up because I just didn't understand it. But there's a quick memory that I just had of Labor Day weekend, and say why it's Labor Day, because I was in the US when this was happening. It's September 2000. September 1999. So was that 32 years ago? And I was on the western shore, the Californian shore of Lake Tahoe on a Saturday morning, just walking along the little boulders by the side of the lake shore. My mind was so relaxed that I could see my future ahead of me in a way that I hadn't done before. And, I just was about to turn 21. And that was from a place of being really quiet inside. But I didn't know that at the time. I didn't put those two things together. I was too busy enjoying myself. And from the space within came this clarity of realizing at that point what I wanted from my life. Now, the stuff that I wanted at that time soon became out of date because I met somebody else. A different woman came back into my life when I came back home from California, and lots of my priorities changed. And then they changed again, and they changed again, and they changed again. But the feeling of being on solid ground in that morning, long before I'd heard of the three principles. I don't even know if it was called the three principles at the time. It might have been called psychology of mind. Back in 1991, I don't know. But that was an example of waking up to something that was evidently true. That space within, whatever it was called. And it's funny that now I remember it, and I can't remember the last time I thought of that Saturday morning in early September of 91, hopping across those little boulders. Thanks.
Thank you, Wyn. You've been listening to Under the Noise. I'm Kate Roberts, and I'm here with Wyn Morgan. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions for topics, please reach out. We'd love to hear them. And if you have any more unrationalizable coincidences, this is our last call. We'd love to get more of them for the show. Have a great week. Thanks for joining us. We'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and review. If you have a topic or question that you'd like us to chat about, email Wyn or Kate at wyn@winning.co.uk and Kate at katerobertscoaching.com. Until then, enjoy what's possible under the noise.